Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James, and I'm joined today by Bryan Christopher, Derek Anderson, and Scott Drebit. In this episode, we will be discussing PG, Psycho Goreman. We'll be discussing Skull the Mask, and much, much more that we'll save for later. We're going to jump right into Psycho Goreman. This is directed by Steven Kostanski of Astron 6 fame. He directed The Void. He directed a new Leprechaun movie, Father's Day, and many more. And for me, this is one of my favorite movies from him. I know a lot of people recently have seen it thanks to its recent release on Shudder, including my co-hosts. And so I'm going to turn it right over to Scott. And Scott, why don't you tell us what you thought?
Then I shall do that, Jonathan. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much, as I do with, a lot of the output from the Astron 6 people. I guess we can't even call them a collective anymore. I don't think that they're still actively as a 6-man team. But regardless, every faction of them really creates something unique. And what I really loved about this movie is, being of a particular vintage, the general feel of this movie reminded me of Saturday morning cartoons, and particularly the Sid and Marty Krofft shows like H&R Puff and stuff, where you just accept that person is in a giant costume. It's a part of the reality. And you see that employed somewhat in Psycho Goreman, and it's affectionately done, and it's done with a lot of heart and humor and spirit. And it's a very funny movie. And I totally dig it.
I think in like the spirit of like the Saturday morning cartoon or something like that, it's a movie that the tone is all over the place, which is usually for me a drawback. But here I feel like it's being done so deliberately. Like there's so many different narrative threads that have their own kind of special like vibe to them. So you have these two kids who stumble on this intergalactic kind of warlord. There's kind of that, after school special feeling to it. But then you have like all these weird subplots, like the intergalactic council that's kind of figuring out what to do about Psycho Goreman. And that's got kind of like a Muppets vibe to it, just with all the different, like the costumes, and some of it is puppetry. You're not even actually getting like people in costumes. I actually absolutely loved all the different like costume design for those folks. And then you have that just really weird kind of like kitchen sink relationship drama going on between the kids' parents. For me, one of the key kind of connections of the Astron 6 group is the dad is played by Adam Brooks, I believe, who is the lead from The Editor. And he is so good at like playing these weird over-the-top caricatures of people, and he really kind of brings that to another level as the dad, the kind of the stereotypical lazy dad who just like takes like one dig with the shovel and like breaks his hand, and is I think like without a job. Like the mom does everything in the house, and he's just kind of this completely worthless dude. But like, just this is all like a subplot in a movie that like in any other movie wouldn't need it, but for some reason, like putting all of these disparate things together in just this kind of big, crock pot of a mess just completely works, whereas most movies couldn't make that work.
Yeah, it feels to me like a feature-length version of Too Many Cooks, that Adult Swim short film by Casper Kelly that I think came out in like 2014. And that one, it just like gradually gets more and more bonkers as it goes on. And it feels like this kind of just nails that atmosphere and then fleshes it out into a feature film. And also with the creature design, which totally feel, all these characters feel plucked out of like a Power Rangers TV show, where it feels like they would have fought each of these characters like in their own episode. But in this one, it's all just like Power Rangers villains. And it's awesome because those were always kind of creepy, and it's something always felt kind of off about them watching that as a kid. Like you felt like they were from another dimension. It didn't feel like this kind of stereotypical like creature from outer space that you'd see in a lot of like mainstream media at the time. But dang, these characters feel so fleshed out. And if, like, you can tell, especially when the council shows up to, like, we see the council meeting, and then we see all these characters come to fight Psycho Goreman, and it just feels like Steven and his crew came up with like really intricate backstories to each of these characters based on what their like fighting abilities are and their creature design. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if one day we got a comic book series and it totally like went into backstories, really elaborate backstories of all these characters. So it just feels like there's so much thought that went into this, even though it's also feels just super random.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with the comparisons to like Power Rangers monsters. Like, this is like if they did an episode of Power Rangers where it's like, yeah, instead of like this big, I don't know, like, you know, giant thing with a pig face, it's this giant vat of like guts and body parts that gets punched so they all fall out of it. But yeah, it's you know, I wouldn't have been surprised, even though this is, you know, many years later, to find out that like the costume design or that people from the Power Rangers were involved with that, because yeah, there is a very similar look to those monsters, and it's just they went, you know, up to a gory hard R instead of like, you know, TV, you know, Y or PG or whatever Power Rangers would have been.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't really see the Power Rangers connection personally, but then now that you brought it up, it makes complete sense, and now I can see that. You know, I kind of went to, you know, to 80s right away with like, there was some like things that reminded me of like The Gate, and you know, you could say some other stuff too. Maybe like Guyver came to mind. But Power Rangers, like I said, make an R-rated Power Rangers also, like I said, it makes complete sense. What I really liked about this was, you know, I think something that's interesting is that no matter what your reference point is for this type of movie, there's something to love. So as Derek said, you know, he called out Power Rangers, and Scott had called out, you know, 70s TV before. I called out 80s, and, you know, and so it really doesn't matter like what your point of view is. This kind of has those like, this kind of taps into nostalgia, but not in a way that you know, that feels like it ripped off any one thing.
And it doesn't cater to it, right? It's not condescending to it, and it's telling a straightforward story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got these these little Easter eggs are things that you can appreciate if you notice them, but it's not, the movie isn't dependent on you noticing to enjoy it. But like, I do 100% agree, Jonathan, like that when they first dig up that hole and it's got like the purple glow and the smoke coming out of it, that's like right out of the gate. But that entire sequence, like, if that anybody who hasn't seen The Gate, or if they have seen it but it went over their head, like, they're not going to, like, they're not losing anything out. You know, that's just an extra little flourish for people who would go like, oh yeah, that's from The Gate.
Yeah, the eggs, the Easter eggs are very well hidden so that they don't distract from the story.
Yeah, and I do think that it came from a place of like, they were probably like mining for story ideas, and that might have come to mind. It wasn't like, how can we take a piece of this movie and that movie and like turn this into product? This doesn't feel like it was done like in a way to kind of exploit the viewer. And then also how much they accomplished for such a small budget. I mean, the scale's big, right? They're telling a big story. They tell it in a small way, but it's an intergalactic story, and they're bringing in these, you know, creatures, and they're doing it in a very effective way, which shows, you know, how the entire crew is just really well equipped to handle this, when, you know, plenty of productions with a much larger budget can't do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the big scope. They really don't have that many filming locations. It seems like there's kind of a few key locations, but they're like the flashbacks whenever Psycho Goreman goes into a story, and the way they like bring those different worlds to life. They do it in such a cost effective way, but they are so schooled in practical effects and how to, I think, make things look better than their budgets would normally allow. I think that goes a really long way here. And that's when you have the difference of like someone who's directing who has such a huge background in practical effects and knows basically like this is right in their wheelhouse, and they're able to just churn out all these amazing creations and then kind of build the story around that.
And then on top of that, then you're forced to look at what really matters, which is your story, your script, and your performances. I think what they accomplish here on such a budget is nothing short of miraculous. And then you're forced to look at the performances and the script much more intently, because when you have a big blockbuster, of course, there's many more things to distract you. When you have something on this scale, even though it is a very big scale, but on this budget, the performances and the script are under more of a microscope, I find. And Psycho Goreman's script is terrific. It's playful, it's goofy, it's heartwarming without being cloying. It's really a clever script, and the actors are so good. They totally sell the performances, from the little girl and her brother, the mom and dad, and to me, he's giving off a Bob Odenkirk vibe. I think that's who I'm getting from Dad. But and I think that's one of the great side effects of having this small budget, is that when the performances and the script are this good, you just notice them that much more. And I think it just gives them a little bit more of an extra special feel.
Yeah, and when it comes to performances, Nita Josie Hannah as Mimi, the central little girl, I just love the decision to have her play it as psychotic, because it's just like, is there another movie where that they've kind of played that aspect of it, like where it wasn't like necessarily like, obviously they've done like the evil kid trope, but she's not evil, she's just demented. And like the line reading at the beginning where like her parents are calling it like kooky ball, and she just like cuts it like, it's crazy ball. Like, I love that energy.
No, it's like it's like she was zapped in from a Nickelodeon show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes, she totally could have been on like, she would have fit in well on All That. And I'm sure, Derek, you would probably, of the four of us, probably the only other person who would appreciate that.
Hey, yes. I watched All That. Come on now.
Been watching Kenan Thompson literally since I can remember memories.
Well, then fine. Then everybody but Scott will appreciate the All That references.
All right.
Yeah. And I think it just plays perfectly into the story too, because it is this kind of really zany vibe that they're going for. And the funny thing is that it's not just like you mentioned, it's the kids, but it's also the parents, and like the dad just freaking out throughout the movie and like kind of having like a mental breakdown like anyone would when there's this alien that's like invading your life and kind of making you challenge the universe as you know it and your perception of it. And so it kind of like, they have fun with it, but they also are like, yeah, this would also kind of mess someone up if they were around a situation like this.
Yeah, he's also just not a normal guy.
Well, there is that.
Dad is clearly played for laughs, I hope. Because
yeah, let's hope.
Yeah, he was already gone before the stuff started hitting the fan.
That's yeah, I think that's fair. Anyone who cooks chicken like that, I mean, it's not gonna something's not going right.
I guess to a degree, like everyone in that family except maybe Luke is off before this happens. And I think that's why, like, in the context of this movie, they're kind of perfectly suited to plug into this. Because, you know, if it's two normal kids and they come across this giant thing, of course, like, you know, they run away, end of movie. Like, you need the little sociopath, like, weirdo who's going to see this as an opportunity rather than something to flee from.
You know, I think it also would have been reversed. I hadn't really thought of it, but what we normally see in a situation like this is the focus is on we're seeing things through the sane brother's eyes. He's our surrogate. And then the sister is just the crazy sidekick, right? That's switched here, and they say, no, the crazy sidekick, she's the star, right? They're going all Jack Burton is what they're doing.
Actually, I would take that even a step further, and thank you for the Big Trouble in Little China reference. I always appreciate that. But I would even take it a step further and say that, like in a movie like The Monster Squad, the boys are the ones who get to have all the fun, while the sister is kind of like off on the side, like either being the voice of the audience or trying to be the voice of reason. So here they're really mixing it up. Like it's, the sister is the center of the center of attention. She's also completely the unreasonable one. And yeah, that subversion, Scott, is, I think, really important and part of why this movie is so much fun.
And creatively, I think it's a really smart decision, because tonally, if you have this crazy family, like, you can kind of, expose them to anything. It's like, it's not that far out of the realm of possibility that they're interacting, with these crazy characters or encountering these situations. So like it suspends belief in a way that, like, it feels real within the world they've created.
And there's just like, sorry, go ahead, Derek.
Oh no. Yeah. Just seconded on that one.
Yeah. I think this movie is actually all about subversion of just all expectations. Mimi for one, the relationship of the family, and I think just kind of the way they play with, who's the villain, who's the hero, what is a villain, what is a hero. There's no subtle discussions being had, but just the fact that, like, they're introducing this universe where, again, in any other movie, Psycho Goreman is going to be, he's the thing you ultimately need to stop. And the person coming after him, the person all in white is the hero. And the fact that they play with that, and, it turns out like the Templar is just this religious zealot, who is just kind of, keeping entire civilizations under their thumb. While Psycho Goreman, you can see how he got to just be this big ball of rage, but at the same time, he also might be interested in hunky boys. So like, there's just so much that they're playing with and turning on its head in this movie.
Yeah, and I like how the Templars, they kind of remind me of the angels from Diablo 3, where at first you would think, oh, it's heaven versus hell, and they must certainly be good, but they also have their own agenda and everything like that. And I feel like this movie does a really good job of showing you how everyone kind of has an angle, and there really aren't any traditional heroes or villains. It's kind of like you just draw your own line in the sand and you're with what you're okay with. And I feel like no character is completely one way or the other. I think everyone kind of has their own flaws in this movie, and that's what makes it so great.
And that includes a great big old spoiler warning for this. So like, if you haven't seen this and you don't want it spoiled, go ahead, like 30 seconds. But like, just in the ending where it's like, if we're following kind of the Saturday morning cartoon or the after school special, like Psycho Goreman kind of like realizes the errors of his ways and realizes that, humanity is worth saving. And it's like, nope, he is going to go out and absolutely obliterate everybody. He's just going to leave this family alone because he's taking a shining to them.
Yeah, and he's going to use the force of love to do so too.
That's right. Well, you were talking about the strict good, capital G, versus evil, and that's how we start kids off, right? We start off with the white hat, and we start off with the black hat, and then as they get to be about that age of our little heroine, those shades of gray come in, and she would be on that kind of show. Now, Psycho Goreman says, that's lovely, but you know what? Instead of shades of gray, let's just make it all red.
And then consume it whole.
Yes.
A warrior's death.
That's right.
Yeah, and if you haven't checked it out, there's a great practically perfect entry interview that Heather Wixson did with Steven on dailydead.com, and he kind of goes into some of the inspirations of the movie and the practical effects, and there's some fun behind the scenes stories in there too, so be sure to check that out. if you want to learn more about what went into the making of this madness.
And that's a good way to. I think we talked about Psycho Goreman enough. Unless there's any final thoughts, we can move on.
Gore, fantastic. Heart, never bigger. Performances, lovely. Script, funny. Watch now. Don't walk.
And definitely
that
a great like sister companion to Turbo Kid, I think.
Absolutely. And
we want to know.
Possibly, I don't know, another film has in common with the film that we're going to be discussing shortly.
Ooh.
Or presently.
Or presently, yeah, Scott. Why don't you tell us what film that is and what you thought about it?
Why, Jonathan, I think I will. Let's talk about Skull, the Mask. Currently streaming on Shudder Canada, your number one source of horror and horror entertainment. Are you subscribed to Shudder Canada? You should be. Okay.
Or if you live in an actual country like the United States, it is also playing on actual real Shudder, and you can watch it there as well.
Yeah, just regular Shudder. This isn't an ad either.
Shudder Original.
Shudder Classic, as opposed to Shudder Canada, which is new Shudder.
Anyway, I think what this film has in common, to its credit, with Psycho Goreman, is it has a few similar strengths. Both low budgets that are forced to focus on performance and stories, and great gore. This one, however, is not a comedy or played for laughs. Certainly not the way that Psycho Goreman is. But it's a really grisly, fastish paced. We'll get to that, I'm sure. I'm sure Brian, and but it sticks to its story from beginning to end, and it's a solid story. It's a busy story. Brian's probably going to say convoluted, but I would just say it's got some interesting offshoots to it. And I'm not done. And I just really enjoyed it. I just really enjoyed it. It's solid. It's really solid.
See, it's funny actually. What made me want to watch this is I think for the longest time, like my brain conflated this and Psycho Goreman, because it was just like, yeah, it's got like two big hulking monster things in it, and it's really gory. So I figured it was like I was confusing the two of them, and I thought like when I realized it's two different things, I'm like, oh, they probably have very kind of similar vibes. And other than the fact that they're both very gory, I think these are very different movies. Like this is not played, like you said, Scott, for laughs. I think there's some humor in it, but it is more of a straightforward slasher film with some what I think is actually really interesting
supernatural elements. Yeah,
supernatural elements and kind of some mythology worked in there. And I didn't find it too convoluted. I actually think the problem for me with this was that it fell into the trap that some slashers do, where it has some really great gore gags, really great kill sequences, but in between it just kind of is there. Like I can't say it's bad, but there's just stuff there that didn't really I found myself looking at my watch, waiting for the next kill, and when they did come, they did not disappoint. You get this is a very goopy movie, is how I was describing it to Scott when we were kind of like texting back and forth about it. There is blood aplenty. There are all manner of viscera and intestines and creative use of said body parts. Like at one point, this skull demon is walking around with like this giant kind of machete blade.
Give him a basic
I guess you need a little bit of the background flavor. So it's essentially there's this mask that we see in this like early 1940s kind of prologue, where there's this big ongoing like a ritual where they're trying to activate there's a god kind of imbued in this mask. I'll be honest, for the life of me, I cannot remember what this the god was named, but it's essentially like bringing up this demon avatar that is going to facilitate like mass sacrifices that will bring on like this bigger, badder god that will kind of come and take over the world. And so somehow it's not quite
it's Crash
successful.
Bandicoot.
Exactly. It's not quite successful when they try it in the 40s. So it's kind of trying to make a comeback in present day as it's found in like an archaeological dig. There is this corporate team who's trying to get their hands on it for their own nefarious purposes. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like there are a lot of elements here, because then there's also kind of a subplot about this damaged cop who she's very corrupt. She's had to do a lot of like messed up things, kind of quote unquote in the line of duty just to survive as a cop, which basically just translates to she is literally angry the entire time she's on screen. So there's a lot of things coming together, but they all do connect for me. It's just that it's not as compelling to me as like I just want to see this big demon avatar killing people and doing so in creative ways.
But see, that's sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that's what I loved about it the most is the ambition. I mean, you're talking a minuscule budget here. And this story branches out. This story has subplots, and it's just I was fascinated. Usually, you would see in a film in a film with a budget this size, it would just be he puts on the mask and then he chases people through the woods for an hour and a half, and that movie doesn't want to do this and doesn't do this. Like you said, it introduces that mythology of the mask of this ancient demon. I think I want to say Anthuba or something like that.
It's like Anyanga or something, or something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. I was totally into that. I was thought, you know what? They're going for it. And even though they don't have the budget, they have the imagination, and yeah, there is some pacing issues. It gets saggy in the middle, without question. A couple of the performances are better than others, but I think overall the performances are good. And I just think as a whole that it ends up working for me really well because of the ambition and scope, and I think and some real clear talent on display too from our directors Armando Fonseca and Capel Furman.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate kind of like the grand scope they're trying to give it. I just don't, for me, I don't think the movie's personality really comes through unless the skull demon is on screen. Like for me, and it's not even just the gore. There's this sequence that I really loved when it's attacking this kind of like priest warrior who's one of the side characters, and they have this shot where these two are fighting in front of this kind of like they've turned the whole screen into a giant like plate glass window, and it's got this very like old school vintage 70s feel to it. And I feel like if they would have done more of that, and maybe budget was a limiting factor for that kind of thing, but like I think if they incorporated more of that kind of visual aesthetic throughout the movie, I think it would have done more to kind of keep me engaged.
I could see that. I can see that for sure. And I totally get that. And for me, it was that drive, it was that ambition to see, and that curiosity to see where this story was going to go. Cause obviously they wanted to go places, and, so that's what was driving me to get over any rough patches, was that determination to see what the hell are they going to do in this thing.
And when they go for it, and so it's while I do have some issues with the pacing, I would definitely recommend giving this one a shot, because it is just it's so much fun to watch when they do go for it. They don't hold anything back, or as much as they possibly can with the budget that they had for this. And so, I definitely think there's a lot of merit in this one. And it's actually proving to be like 2021. This is the second Brazilian horror movie I've seen, which I think is 2 more than I've ever seen before. So this is between this and another one I think I've talked about before, The Cemetery of the Lost Souls. Brazil is bringing the gory, because that's also a very goopy movie. So if you like the red stuff, this is definitely going to be one for you to check out. Plus, it's also just Portuguese is a very fun language to listen to. It's kind of got the elements of Spanish, kind of the Latin languages, but I don't. I hear like a little like mixture of like French in there or something that gives it a special extra flavor. That it's a fun language to hear.
It's very lyrical. It's pleasant. Some languages are not pleasant. I have no doubt that the English language is unpleasant to a lot of people, and there are just some languages that are unpleasant to certain ears. These ears like the actors in Skull quite a bit. Very mellifluous, pleasant voices to listen to.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a good double feature with Psycho Goreman too, just based on how far they go into it.
Well, it depends on how you want to program it, right? I mean, if you're going for tone, then they're completely different movies. I think if you're going for, hey, here's a double feature of how to get the most bang for your dollar, and then some. These
centered on like a big hulking figure.
Yes, without stalking them through the woods, then have we got a couple for you?
And I like to do that. If I'm going to watch a movie, unless I'm like doing some kind of like movie marathon or like drive-in, like if I'm just watching movies by myself, I'd actually rather them be tonally different so I don't blend them together. Especially if I watch like 4 movies in a day and they're all kind of the same. Like it's easy for me to kind of confuse them. I guess I'm easily confused.
In our last episode, I started talking about the Phantasm little tribute in Psycho Goreman while we were talking about a different movie.
Yes.
And yet I forgot to talk about it during Psycho Goreman. Well, there you go.
That was a great way to bring it up.
So yes, everybody, there is a Phantasm Easter egg in Psycho Goreman.
Do I stutter? I thought that was clear.
Okay.
I don't know. Are there any Turbo Man references in Psycho Goreman?
You mean Turbo Kid?
Yeah, that's what I said.
There's Jingle All the Way references.
No, Turbo Man. Yeah. There are Turbo
There
Man
are.
doll in Psycho Goreman. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, you missed it. There was one. Oh, okay, we're going to move this right along. We're going to move it along to, I think only I've seen this, so I'm just going to talk to myself. Have any of my co-hosts played the Castlevania video games? Let's start with that.
No.
Yes.
I heard a yes.
Way back in the day, the earlier, like regular 8-bit Nintendo versions of Castlevania.
I've only watched the Angry Video Game Nerd play Castlevania, the Nintendo versions. But
I don't know if that counts, but I know a bunch of people who love watching streaming would say, no, it does. So I'll just leave it there and say it counts. So yeah, I started with the original Castlevania. I wasn't in love with the original Nintendo Castlevania just because I didn't own it. So when I played it, it was at other people's house. But I loved playing Castlevania on the Game Boy Advance. I had a number of those. I had Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And I really enjoyed that story. As convoluted as it is, I mean, as our listeners probably know at this point, if it's got vampires or Dracula, then I'm probably going to like it. And so, Castlevania wrapped up its 4th season on Netflix just this past week, a couple weeks ago. And anyway, I just wrapped it up a couple days ago. And we haven't really talked about it much on Corpse Club, but I really do think it's a pretty fascinating show. It is. Yeah. What do you got?
this coming from the person who knows the least of the video games and shows that they may have stemmed from. Please explain to me Castlevania, a game first and then a show and now a game again, or a show first and then it was a game, or what's the frequency, Kenneth?
That's an excellent song and an excellent question. So it started out as a video game. Konami released it, I'm going to say in the 80s. I think the big thing about the game or the game series, if you had to explain it just very briefly, is that you are in this labyrinth-like castle and you have a whip and you need to kind of whip creatures on your way to try to get out of this castle and evade traps to fight Dracula or whatever your enemy is going to be, if it's not going to be Dracula. But like I said, most of it is spent. There are games where you're going to spend time outside as well, but certainly a lot of that is heavy. I said heavily in a castle, and you just go. It's a side scroller, so kind of like Metroid. Old school Metroid or Mario or whatever. You're going from one side of the screen to the other, trying to evade and, or kill creatures on your way. And so you're going to upgrade your whip. You're going to get different types of whips, different types of weapons. And as these stories kind of get, it's got a convoluted mythology. So, one of the things that they had to be able to do was, figure out how do you take all these characters and this kind of convoluted story and turn it into something that people will want to watch. And I think that's what they did. And that was, I think they did it really successfully, having seen the 4 seasons now. But for anybody who's kind of looking for like I guess, I would just say like a Game of Thrones meets Dracula is the quickest thing that came to mind. I mean, that's kind of this, we're introduced to, just a handful of characters. You have this character named Trevor Belmont, who has his family's got a past as famous vampire hunters, but he's he really doesn't want anything to do with it, and he gets forced to kind of deal with this with these ever increasing vampire problems. And as he meets more characters, we get introduced to more of the vampire politics, and we get introduced to, we're introduced to Dracula pretty early on, who's a little different from our normal Dracula, and more like the Gary Oldman Dracula we have from the Francis Ford Coppola movie, and that he really is, someone who's, lovesick from losing his wife. And that's kind of what drives him. And then, from there, we get introduced to more vampires, and then we see more politics, and the story starts to spread out. And then we're following multiple storylines that all converge by season 4. They all converge together and wrap up in a pretty satisfying way. I was pretty happy with it.
Sorry, I'm just looking on IMDb. Jonathan, are you sure it's Dracula? They have this guy, James Callis, listed as a Alucard?
Aha, that is a different character. That is Dracula's son, who is a Dampier.
Thank you.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
And a carryover from the video game series.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But while you're looking at the IMDb section for this, you'll probably notice that there is a pretty killer voice cast. So I think one of the things that they did for this is that, a lot of these, they'll live and die based on the animation, of course, but they'll also live and die based on your voice cast. And as you start scrolling down more and more, like they brought in Barbara Steele, Malcolm McDowell's in the last season, Jason Isaacs is in one of the seasons,
Bill
and so
Nye.
Yeah, and he's in season 3 and 4, and pretty big part of that. So yeah, it has a pretty killer voice cast.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, and I'll say I think I fell off a little bit. I only got a few episodes into the 3rd season, so I do need to catch up. But it's a show that I really like, and I appreciate. It's one of those shows that is, it doesn't pull punches in terms of, it's definitely rated M. There is a lot of animated gore, but it's also got a pretty good sense of humor to it. Like there are jokes that kind of they land in ways that you don't think that they would, or again, kind of going back to that discussion about like finding the balance of tone. It manages to find a way of having humor that you would find in like other cartoons that really aren't really like they're talking about the same things or going through the same themes, because this is, this is, like you said, Jonathan, like this is kind of like Game of Thrones with vampires, just in terms of there's a lot of like machinations and people are trying to like screw one another over, and people are trying to find ways to kind of stab each other in the back, but there's also just like every once in a while like they'll just pull a joke out of nowhere, and for some reason like you would think that it would come out of nowhere and not really land, but they're good about like placing it at just the right spot that it actually does, it works within the context of the series.
I think one thing they do too is that, I think some of the best characters are not the main ones. Since you got into season 3, I'm assuming, and I remember in season 2 they had them as well, these Forge Masters. So they have a couple characters that you follow that have the ability to like take the dead and turn them into these, undead creatures to join the ranks of the vampires. And we follow them, once you're introduced to them, we follow them through, the rest of the story, and they become bigger characters, but like in a more focused show or in different hands, it may not have followed them at all. And I like that it gave weight to those characters, or Saint Germain, who we see played by Bill Nighy in season 3 and 4, another character that's just kind of a delight to watch to see what they're going to get up to. And yeah, they just, like I said, they do a really good job with this. It was kind of unexpected because Castlevania hasn't, like, I think it's a popular like brand name, but there hasn't been a game in like 10 years. And even that game that came out 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't all that well received. I do remember playing it, but I do believe it was like kind of vastly different from what they had released previously. So they're not even making Castlevania games right now. So this kind of came out of nowhere.
And I do appreciate too that it's like, it's a game that is, kind of to your point about how they have interesting supporting characters. From what I remember about the video game, for the most part, it's pretty singular. Like it's Trevor, and it all comes back to Trevor versus Dracula, if I remember correctly, at least in the earlier versions. And here they've turned it into an ensemble. So yeah, it was like you were saying, Jonathan, like that's not an easy task to do, and I think they pulled that off.
Yeah, I remember I watched the first season of it and really enjoyed it, but then for whatever reason, I just never got back onto it when season 2 came around, and now it's already the end of the series. So I guess I'll have to go back. I'd probably want to rewatch season 1 at this point as well, but I know I've heard nothing but good things about it. And as another Daily Dead commercial, Caitlin Kennedy wrote a great write-up on the entire series on dailydead.com. So be sure to check that out.
And it's also not too heavy a lift for people who want to check it out. Like if I remember correctly, I think the first season is like all of 4 episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not many at all.
The whole series is 32 episodes, and they're half-hour episodes. So like,
oh yeah,
it's maybe 16 hours worth of content for the entire series. So it's not a huge lift to kind of like, and it's also, I think, one of those things, Jonathan, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll know pretty quickly if it's something you're going to vibe with. We've talked in previous shows about how like, sometimes there's that first rough season and you kind of need to give it time. This is one where I'll say, like, if you don't like it 2 or 3 episodes in, this is what you're going to get. So it continues to be good, and it kind of continues to build on things, but it's not like it becomes this whole new thing by the second, third, or fourth season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think one of the cool things too is, hopefully this will turn more people on to Castlevania. I haven't checked because I haven't looked into like their like older game offerings in a while on the Switch, but I would hope that they have some of these games available for the Switch now.
They do. They have like a bundle or something where you can get like a lot of them.
Cool. Yeah. So then, watch this, and if you enjoy this, then have a lot of fun playing it on the Switch, or just play it on the Switch. You can go either way, but there's some good games there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. There's the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, and it has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 iterations of the Castlevania games, starting with the original one up through History of Castlevania, Book of the Crescent Moon. So yeah, if you like the show and you want to give the games a try, it's $20 for Nintendo Switch.
Wow. So now I have to get that.
Go back to your Game Boy Advance days.
Yeah, I still have my GBA. I have my GBA and all my little games. I'm sure it still plays, but I used to love that thing.
Oh yeah, that's a sweet handheld device right there.
Yeah. I mean, now I have a Switch. I mean, technically Christy has a Switch, but I just don't use it that much. I just don't have the time. I want to play more games. I really do. I just don't have the time.
She won't let you, will she?
No, she will.
Jonathan's too busy playing PlayStation 5.
I might have been a little busy playing on the PS5.
You got more time to play games, but you're trying to finish the games you're already playing.
No, that is the curse of having too many games, and it's like, yeah, and I was looking for something. I finished Resident Evil Village, of course. That's great. Play it, please. And I was looking for something else to play. I tried to get back to Days Gone, but I couldn't do it. So because it's 40 hours, I'm getting terrible when it comes to games, because people will complain about games that are too short. But like, if it takes 30 hours or more to beat a game, I have to question whether I have time to play it.
And yet you wouldn't watch Bates Motel all the way through. No.
No, I'm saying I'm not doing it.
Yeah,
yes.
That's true. I guess if you were to play a game you weren't fully into, then I would be warranted in saying that.
Yep. So no, you're not yet.
Good analogy, Derek. Good analogy.
Also, Derek, I feel like you've been hanging on to that one for a while.
It does sound like he had saved it.
There's no resentment in that comment. Of course not. No, I know Tamika would have my back on this, that we like our Bates Motel, and I know not everyone stayed around until the end, but that's all right.
But she's not here, is she? So
yeah, she couldn't make it, so she can't. Yeah, she can't defend you. But this sounds like your TV segue, Derek. So I'm okay. I'm okay moving into what you got. So what have you been watching lately, Derek?
Well, I've been keeping up
with trepidation.
We've been watching Fear the Walking Dead, the back half of season 6. And so if you've stuck with Fear the Walking Dead this long, I've always been a defender of Fear the Walking Dead. I know a lot of people seem to stop watching after the first season. I feel like season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead was an amazing season. I've always enjoyed it more consistently, I think, than a lot of people have. And I know it like The Walking Dead, I think it's had ups and downs, and it's kind of gone through some growing pains at times, but I feel like right now it's stronger than ever. And actually, this second half of the 6th season is probably one of the most fun stretches of any Walking Dead series. And me and my family, we've watched The Walking Dead all the way through. We've watched The Walking Dead World Beyond and Fear the Walking Dead. But what they're doing with this back half has been so interesting, because they incorporated this new group that's like a doomsday cult in the apocalypse. So these people, like the zombie apocalypse isn't enough. They have like another version of the apocalypse that they want to see all the way through. And it's led by this guy named Teddy, who's played by John Glover, who I grew up watching as Lionel Luthor on Smallville. And he is so interesting as a villain and so all over the place, but in a great way. And he's unlike anything I've ever seen on any Walking Dead series. And I feel like the last episode, the most recent episode as of the airing of this episode of this podcast, if you can wrap your head around that, is just one of the most interesting episodes of any Walking Dead series I've seen. So I feel like they're really going to some interesting and weird places. And it feels like it's really embracing what I kind of always wanted from a Walking Dead series, to just get real, like what the comic book series did, was just go really like dark and weird and just kind of embrace the zaniness of the apocalypse too, in a way. and they've brought in Nick Stahl as well, who's in this Doomsday Cult, and it's just been really fun to watch. I feel like they've really kept us guessing this season, and I know not everyone has stuck around for it, but it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I really have to catch up on Fear the Walking Dead. I'm behind on that. Not on the main series, but there's just so much going on. That's one that kind of slipped. It's interesting because there are a lot of people who I get that, why people might have checked out of the main series. But there still is a lot to like, as you mentioned, from Fear the Walking Dead. Like, it still is a franchise or a universe that has like a lot of potential. So I am kind of curious to see where they're going to take things. We know they have new Walking Dead movies. I'm curious to see what new creators will do in there. Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of the Doomsday Cult. So I have to catch back up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's worth it just to see. I have to see if they stick the landing. There's 2 episodes left in this season, but it's been really interesting to see what they do there. And Garrett Dillahunt, if you are an Army of the Dead fan, plays a really great character on the show as well, as a sharpshooter cowboy character. It's very much like the Wild West right now on the show, so it's been really cool. And I've also been watching Nancy Drew, which me, my sister and brother-in-law, we've been watching that since the first episode. It's been nice to have another show waiting for new episodes of Riverdale on the CW. So Nancy Drew's been going strong the last few months, but again, it's gotten really strong. I think Nancy Drew, there was an overarching mystery and they kind of solved it. And I feel like there was definitely some moments of filler during them trying to figure out this overarching mystery. But once they solved it, then they kind of went to what I thought it was going to be, which is more episodic, kind of like each book of Nancy Drew was a different mystery. And they started to do that more. So they're able to explore different types of supernatural hauntings and like a villain kind of monster of the week approach. And I think ever since they got into that groove, it's been really, really good. And I feel like it's been really strong this season. And they've also, on top of just really great like supernatural scares, they've also been tackling a lot of really important issues like systemic racism and just different things going on in society right now. And they interweave it into the show in such a great way that I haven't really seen addressed quite like that anywhere else on anything else I've been watching. I think it really is important, and I feel like it's done in a way that makes sense for the show as well. So it's been really cool. I feel like they've really embraced. I feel like Nancy Drew found its groove, and it finally kind of settled into the show that I think I was kind of hoping it would be from the beginning. And now it's kind of getting towards the end of the second season, and I think it's been renewed for a 3rd season. So I'm going to be tuning into the CW for a while, it looks like, but it's been fun.
And so, Derek, is this iteration of Nancy Drew kind of following the same vein as like Riverdale and like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, where it's like they're going dark with it?
It is and isn't. I mean, it's not as dark as Sabrina, but I think that's more based on being on network television and not being able to get away with everything that Sabrina did on Netflix. But it does get as dark, I would say, as Riverdale. And I think it's gotten even darker this season, which I think has fit the whole tone of the show a lot better. But it's done in a way where it's also more supernatural than Riverdale. And I think it's actually kind of on par with Sabrina in the supernatural department. They haven't gone like full on.
So it's not like you don't find out at the end it's like a Scooby-Doo ending where like
No.
the ghost is like the guy that runs the theme park or something like that.
No. And which is surprising because I totally thought that would be the case, but they established kind of early on that ghosts exist in this world and like all different demons and curses. And so it's actually like way more supernatural than I expected them to do, because I know like with Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, like you kind of expect it to be like, oh, it's all someone behind a mask or like just pretending to be a ghost or this or that, but they like doubled down on the ghost factor, which is pretty cool.
And I was going to say, yeah, they should, like, are they going to follow up with like a darker version of the Hardy Boys? But I guess Supernatural already ran for 15 seasons, so I guess they already had that covered.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that, but they did introduce the Bobbsey twins and Tom Swift in this season. So I think, and I know Tom Swift, they want to, I believe they're developing a series for that character. And I didn't really read any Tom Swift books growing up, but they're doing a kind of an really cool version of that character. And I have to think that it's only a matter of time before the Hardy Boys gets in there somewhere. But yeah, like you said, the Winchester brothers kind of had that nailed down too.
So I'm going to turn it back to Bryan because, Bryan, I know there was a movie you wanted to talk about.
Yes, so this is not a new movie, but it's a new movie to me, and another one that just landed on Shudder recently. I just recently checked out, I believe it's 1996's Brian Yuzna's The Dentist with Corbin Burnson. I will say I am having a bit of a reevaluation of 90s movies. Unfortunately, even though I grew up in the 90s, I was too stuck in thinking that the 80s were the end all be all of horror. So I missed out, I think, on a lot of good stuff because I just automatically saw, like, you know, some of these direct to video sequences, I just associated them with, like, you know, bad keyboard soundtracks and just the stuff that a tween/teen would kind of just dismiss too matter-of-factly, and I think I missed a lot of really good 90s stuff. So keeping an eye out for stuff that I can swing back around on. Yeah, this was one that I am both glad I checked out because it's a lot of fun, but then also I remembered, like, I'm one of those people who don't really like going to the dentist. So this just kind of amped that up to, you know, 27 out of 10 in terms of, like, the cringe factor. Because this is, you know, Brian Yuzna taking all those kind of really good, cringy, gory gore gags and just putting that in teeth. There's just a lot going on in this that just had me, like, looking through my fingers while also trying not to grate my teeth too much because I don't want to go to the dentist after seeing this movie. It's got a very operatic feel to it, which I like, you know, which is an obvious component of it because he's got, like, this obsession with opera. But I like the way it's kind of like, if Pagliacci was a sad clown but a sad dentist, that's kind of what this is, and just with a lot more gore and, like, B movie kind of trashy goodness, I would say, because I really liked it.
I'm a fan of this one too. I like it because it doesn't take itself too seriously. We know, you know, Yuzna has a good sense of humor. While at the same time, like you mentioned, digging or drilling, I should say, into those deep fears that a lot of people have of the dentist. And none of it would work if Corbin Burnson wasn't terrific in it. And he's great. I mean, when you think of dentist, when you either think of lawyer or dentist, Corbin Burnson, the smiling, bright, sometimes he'll lead you wrong, sometimes he won't. He's great here. He's good in the sequel too. I like the sequel as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to follow up with that. And I am also a big Corbin Burnson fan from way back. I think starting with Major League. You know, I think he'll, like you said, he'll take you down the wrong path once in a while, but I think more often than not, if you're following him, you won't go wrong.
Yeah, I was Major League. Yeah, Law and Order. He was good old Arnie Becker.
I thought that was L.A. Law.
What did I say?
Law and Order.
Yeah, forget that. L.A. Law and Order. You remember that show? L.A. Law and Order? That was
yes.
a great. But yeah, it's a fun one. It's a fun
very
one.
very much looking forward to checking out the sequel. Also fun to see, like, this is also one of those movies that is kind of in the orbit of the Stuart Gordon gang, because I think Stuart Gordon was one of the screenwriters for it. Ken Foree makes an appearance as the detective who's kind of like trying to keep up with everything that's going, because it's also kind of funny this all happens over the course of, I think, like a day or two.
It's very harried. It has a great that Stuart Gordon kind of, carnival feel, like you're on a ride. It's a fun movie. It's fun.
Jonathan, Derek, have either of you seen this one yet?
This is one of those that I saw either on HBO or on USA. Like, I remember flashes of it, and that's it. So it is definitely, I'm due for a rewatch.
Yeah, this is one too that I remember I've seen parts of on TV. I feel like they ran this in the sequel. I think it was like USA or something like that. And it seems like it always used to be on TV. So I'd see bits and pieces of it. And I also love Corbin Burnson in Major League. I thought that was just a perfect character for him. And the temper that his character had, I feel like he gets to channel that quite a bit in this movie. But I've been wanting to, like, sit down and watch it properly, like, not the whatever TV version I saw. Who knows what they cut out of there. But yeah, I really wanted to see this. And there was a great piece on Brian Yesna on dailydead.com by Eugenio, where this is also kind of this film is examined, and it really made me want to, like, watch all of his movies. I actually watched Society for the first time last year, and holy crap, that was an experience. So I know The Dentist doesn't go quite that trippy in its final act, but I do want to kind of sit down and watch this and then follow it up with the sequel.
The Dentist is a better movie than Society. Hot take.
Whoa.
Coming in.
Ooh, hot
Look
potato.
out.
Oh my goodness.
Look out. I think so.
That will that will give you some love on Twitter, Scott.
I'm not a big Society guy. I like the Shunt, and I don't think the rest of it really works. I just don't think it does.
And it is interesting too, because I always got The Dentist kind of mixed up with, like, Dr. Giggles, and just it's funny when you look back at some of the 90s horror movies, like some of the characters that came out of that, like, that they centered these horror films on. I don't know. It's fun to revisit and kind of re-examine that and see if it still holds up. And I think in a lot of cases it does.
Yeah, I feel like the three, for some reason, that I kind of grouped together, not necessarily because they belong grouped together, but just because, like, they're ones that I always think of, is The Dentist, like you said, Dr. Giggles, Derek, and for some reason the Ice Cream Man is, like, in that same vein for me. But I've heard that the Ice Cream Man is very not good.
Oh, the ice cream. Let's go hot takes again, because this, for some reason, is, for me anyway, unimaginably popular, or people like it for some reason. It's terrible. It's awful.
Maybe it was you that I heard from.
Maybe it was. I think it's a stinky movie. But you know what I think all those movies have in common? Were they all released on video by Trimark, or were they Trimark movies? Because let me tell you, in the 90s, Trimark was one of the ones that, like, owned the home video market. They had everything from Leprechaun to and others. But you get what I'm saying.
Looks like they weren't responsible for the Ice Cream Man. That looks like Apex Entertainment.
Okay.
Let's see if the Dentist. Talk amongst yourselves. That was a Trimark. Yeah, The Dentist was Trimark.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this was that they were easy to spot at the video store, and that's another reason too why they, you needed easy to remember names, some really catchy art, because you lived and died by that.
Oh shit! Dr. Giggles was distributed by Universal.
Oh yeah.
Whoa. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Didn't Dr. Giggles, didn't it hit theaters? I remember seeing big ads for it.
It made
I saw
a little over $8 million.
I saw Dr. Giggles when I lived in Vancouver in the theater. Yeah.
Yeah, I had I had
12 other people.
I have comic books with Dr. Giggles ads in them.
That one should have been a franchise.
Well, and it was 92, so it was right out of the whole slasher era, where maybe they were trying to make him like the next Freddy or Jason, just with a very different approach.
I would say if they came up with that same concept like 5 years later, post Scream, it would have done a lot better.
Oh, it could have been. Gosh, yeah, what a time. Yeah, very, very much a mixed kind of grab bag in that era.
Mixed grab bag and everywhere.
I was going to say.
It's funny, though. I had to catch myself because I was thinking, Universal released Dr. Giggles. They were also responsible for Phantasm 2, which that didn't really go anywhere. So I almost said the line, I don't think Universal has a very good track record with releasing horror movies. And that would have been not great for me.
What, you don't want to stand by that?
I think that might be a burning hot take if you go with that one.
I mean, name me one,
bold, and I like
name me
it.
one classic Universal horror movie. I'll wait.
You're gonna have a monster of a time trying to come up with one.
Remember, that's at Evil Taylor Hicks.
Yeah, it's like their 80s, 90s strategy was interesting because it was like, let's find a popular movie and then let's give that filmmaker more money and sequelize it. And they definitely had mixed results there.
But you brought up an interesting thing where you were talking about the cover art, how they caught our attention, how the dentist caught our attention. It's no different now. You pop onto Tubi, and there's a lot of movies that get a very quick sweep by. The photoshopped, looks like a fourth grader put it together, and then you see the ones that actually take the time to do a quality poster, like a new movie that's coming out. That's an independent movie. That's not a quality poster. Yes. And all of a sudden you have a spark of interest and you look further into that movie. The cover art it kills me inside, especially when you see a good movie with bad cover art.
Yeah, I do agree with you that it's becoming more and more important because you're fighting not just against the horror section, but against everything on Amazon or Netflix or whatever service you're on, or Tubi.
Yeah. So those, and for horror fans, that really like posters, good posters, and most horror fans, that's part of our deal, right? Is the poster art. And the good ones grab you right away. And that doesn't guarantee, by the way, that the movie is going to be good, but I like them to start there. That's where I get my first little spoonful of confidence, right? When I see a good poster, then I know I'm going to at least investigate further.
And if it winds up being crap, you can at least respect the game or the hustle of,
you go.
They pulled they pulled one over on you, and they at least knew they were going to lure some suckers in from Canada to check out based on the poster.
That's right. Yes.
Well, that's half the fun too, is just going on Amazon Prime and I'm like, I don't even have time to watch something, but I just want to see what's on there. And then maybe I will end up watching it, but it's so much fun to just kind of scroll through and see what pops up.
Oh, a quick Amazon Prime rec for everyone. Slacks, SLAXX, is now on Amazon Prime. And I watched it the other day, and it's terrific. I really, really dug it. It has a great message. It's very funny, and it has a lot of interesting death by denim.
I saw it maybe a few weeks ago, and I want to talk to you about it, but I don't want to talk to you about it on this episode because I feel like a lot of the fun is not knowing what you're getting into.
Oh, totally.
So
I
we'll have to talk about it later.
All right.
But it's good. I agree.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought it up.
And also on Shudder, unless they
Yes,
took
it's on.
it
Was on Shudder. That's where I saw it. Yeah,
It wasn't on Canadian Shudder.
sorry. And
it was on Real Shudder.
Yeah, and before we wrap up, I know that with The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It coming out, maybe on the day that you're listening to this episode, I know, Derek, you recently read a Conjuring prequel comic, so I do want to give a kind of a shout out to that so people could check it out.
Yeah, it just came out. DC Comics is kicking off another horror imprint called DC Horror, and this kind of goes in line with what they've been doing with Joe Hill's Hill House Comics imprint and the Black Label at DC, which has been doing some really great storytelling. So they're continuing to expand their horror titles, and this new imprint is kicked off with The Conjuring The Lover, which is a 5-issue miniseries that is like a prelude to the new movie The Devil Made Me Do It. And it's co-written by the screenwriter of the movie, David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick and Rex Ogle. And it's edited by Katie Kubert, who has been putting together this new line for DC. And it's been really, really cool. I got a chance to talk with them about it, take part in like a roundtable interview with some other journalists. And what's interesting is that DC, kind of part of Warner Media, has this relationship with New Line Cinema. So they're kind of looking at some of the stuff that they could work with in that partnership. And with the new movie coming out, is just a perfect opportunity to do that with The Conjuring. And they take like a smaller character from the movie, and her name is Jessica, and she's a college student. And it's the year is 1981, and it's kind of her going back to college after winter break, and she is dealing with a lot of stuff. She's kind of dealing with isolation and missing home and a certain person from her home life that she really misses. And she's also, on top of all that, potentially being haunted by this sinister force. And they do a really good job of kind of bringing those atmospheric jump scares that James Wan was so good at with the Conjuring movies into the comic book form, because I was kind of curious if they could really translate that to the paneled page, and they do a really good job with that. And on top of that, what's really cool about these Conjuring comics is that each issue comes with a Tales from the Artifact Room like side story. So each of these like miniature stories focuses on a haunted item from the Warrens' artifact room, which is, we of course featured in a lot of the Conjuring movies. And the first one connected with the Ferrymen, which I believe we saw in Annabelle Comes Home, I want to say.
That's correct.
It's written by Scott Snyder, and it's really, really good. And it just kind of adds like these little stories along with the ongoing story of the lover. They're going for like an EC Comics feel. So it really taps into that. And the artwork has this like vintage style to it. So I'm really excited to see where they go with it, and to see kind of where what other Tales from the Artifact Room stories we get, and what other writers and artists they bring into it. But that kicks off their new line, and definitely encourage people to check it out, because it's really cool what they've been doing at DC with horror. I think they're really embracing the retro style, but also doing something new with it too.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see them expand that line, because we weren't sure what was going to happen, because it kind of merged Vertigo back into DC, and then they have DC Black Label. And so I was wondering what was going to happen with their horror titles, and maybe we'd see less, but we're starting to see more. So that's pretty cool. I have to check it out myself.
Horror rules all media, baby. Just look at the box office.
There's a box office still?
There is. A Quiet Place 2. Bringing in big bucks.
Yeah, it did.
Horror is alive and well.
Horror is going to save the theaters. Here's your article.
It's like you're pitching. It's like who are you pitching to?
It was also just like dripping with contempt. There's your article, you
I know.
jackass.
Sorry.
I feel like he's pitching to me, but I know it can't be. So
Sorry, I was getting some training day vibes there.
Now give me my
Rubbing
money,
off on
tool.
Jonathan.
Well, one thing I did want to call out that, as anyone who's been listening, as we kind of have a recommendation, especially over the last maybe year and a half or 2 years, I've been catching up on Junji Ito, and at least on the American releases from Viz, I was all caught up. And so we did have a new short story collection from him called Lovesickness. And so Lovesickness, just came out not too long ago, and I've almost finished it. I have a couple of short stories to go, but the main story is, it's usually what he'll do is he'll have these separate stories, maybe 30 to 60 pages, but then he'll come back to them. And so if you bring them all together, you basically have a full story. And so he kind of does that with this, and this story is about a foggy town where legend goes that if you meet someone on the corner, you can ask them for what's called a crossroads fortune. So you just ask a stranger, hey, when will I die? Or hey, will I fall in love with this person? And it's usually pretty harmless, but in the case of this foggy town, people start dying after they receive their fortune. And so, a lot of his stories happen to center around grade schoolers or high schoolers. So in this case, it is or middle schoolers. So in this case, it is a 13-year-old kid, or, he's at least a teenager, and he has to kind of, solve what's going on and figure out what happens. So, as always, it's pretty cool. I've enjoyed it so far. The stories are always comes up with creative body horror type ways to scare people. And so, it's every new story I get, he comes up with creative new ways to scare and surprise me. So, if you haven't bought any Junji Ito yet, there's just so many. You can head over to Viz or just type in Junji Ito, into Amazon, and they have all these short story collections. They're only $20 a piece. And some of them are 400 pages. So it really isn't a bad deal, especially if you're looking for new things to read. If you're looking, if you're hey, I want to get into comic books, or I want to get into, manga, but I'm not sure where to start. This is a great place to start. It's Cronenbergian, body horror, but, definitely, steeped in Japanese mythology. So I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, thanks for that recommendation too, by the way, because I got I believe it was Shiver from Viz Media, because I wanted to see what was going on with Ito's collections, because I kept hearing such great things about it, and does not disappoint. It's very unnerving storytelling, and the visuals are just truly, I don't know, this kind of horrifying on a whole nother level. And it kind of eases you into the horror, and it's very dreamlike. And I've got a lot of catching up to do with his stuff. And I know it's, like I said, this one's over 400 pages. It's one of those where I think if it'd be fun to just clear an afternoon and just settle down with it and really have some time with it and read through it. But I'm excited to see that he's got new stuff coming out, especially because I think I know a lot of people have called him kind of the Stephen King of graphic novels, and a lot more of his stuff is getting adapted or at least recognized on an international level. So I really want to familiarize myself more with his work. So I'm excited that there's some new stuff to dig into.
Yeah, and there's two more books coming. There's I can't remember the names, but there's one coming out in August and one in December. So, I have more to,
oh my gosh,
more to look forward to. But yeah,
and I think Stephen King.
Yeah, he's got so many. He's been writing since '87 and drawing since '87. So, there's plenty still to translate. But I think one of the cool things is that with Junji Ito, because he's on contract to create these individual stories, which were released as part of larger collections back when he was doing it. And now because he's so well known, his stories are just way out there. He just goes, there's heads that are floating like balloons and that detach from your body.
Yeah, that would be a fun video game adaptation, is just a Junji Ito game where it's just like Silent Hill, but with all of his creations or something like that. Just immerse yourself in that world.
Well, he was supposed to do a game with Del Toro and Kojima, and that fell through.
That's right.
Yeah, it just made me sad. But yes, maybe. I mean, they still might do it. Apparently, there's still talk, but yeah,
that's like the Crow movie. We've been hearing about it for years, and who knows if it'll ever actually happen.
Yeah.
But didn't you hear I'm attached to direct that now?
Real? Oh my gosh! See,
yeah,
can we?
It's gonna happen.
Well, I think I have to cover it if you're part of the new announcement.
I think it got buried in a horror highlights a couple weeks ago.
Oh no.
Oh,
good times. Okay, well, with that, this episode of Corpse Club comes to an end. And we want to thank our engineer, Bryan, for helping us out each and every episode. And as always, we want to thank our listeners, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Head over to corpseclub.com. You can learn how to become a member. You can check out our back catalog of episodes. And, you can get a pin, a t-shirt if you sign up to become a member. You can pick an episode topic. If you want to hear us do commentary on Army of the Dead, Scott said he would. So that's an option.
Sorry, what?
We'll talk Hammer. Scott and I will talk Hammer. If that's what you want. Also, it is Pride Month. And so, similar to what we've done in past months, we'll say that if you do sign up for a Corpse Club membership, we will make a donation on your behalf. I have to find whether it's a Trevor Project or another organization will donate to that. And then also, if you want to make a donation to a charity of your choice, send us, blank out any of the details you want. Just send us an email, contact@corpseclub.com. We'll give you a free membership. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review really helps. And then you can also find us on YouTube and SoundCloud and all of your favorite podcast providers. If you want to get in touch, you can reach out anytime. As I mentioned, we're at contact@corpseclub.com. You can reach us on Twitter. We're at Daily Dead News. We're at Corpse Club. And on Instagram and Facebook, we are under Corpse Club as well. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.